Well, I mentioned Neal Barber. Neal is representing Housing Virginia, and Neal is going to say a few words today about his perspective on housing and transportation, or housing in the Bay Area and how it's changed. But Neal has a long, very successful resume working in the state, around the state in affordable housing, community development. He lives in Middlesex County, so he's very local. But Neal, I'll let you talk to the group.
Good enough. Thank you very much. So my part of this program today is sort of give an overview of the question of how affordable is housing in this region, and a little bit about how transportation impacts the affordability of housing a little bit. Today, with Housing Virginia, I'm the staff, one of 3 staff people that work with Housing Virginia on a statewide basis. We are a statewide nonprofit organization that is made up of a lot of representatives of key state housing interests, BHDA, the Realtors Group, Mortgage Bankers Association, and all those home builders, etc., are our member organization. We do 3 things. We provide data on housing on a statewide basis, as well as regionally and locally in local jurisdictions. We do policy work, which is housing and transportation is one of our areas, and we also work with local and regional groups in advocating for affordable housing within their localities, all the way from Roanoke to Northern Virginia to the East Hampton Roads. So what I would like to do, again, is to talk a little bit about how affordable housing is in the region, and give you a little bit about one of the things that's an online resource as part of our website, and you can go to housingvirginia.org, is Sourcebook. And there it gives you a variety of information about housing in your locality, in the region, as a statewide basis. And it tries to answer these 2 questions: how affordable is housing, and how has it changed over time? And the third thing it does is allows you to compare your locality to other localities across the state as well as region. The information that we have in there, we do this. The key feature is our Housing Affordability Index. It relates housing costs to housing incomes in your region. And basically, the question is, what is the percent of the typical household income that is necessary to afford the typical house within your locality? And we have various variations of that question for ownership, rental, and various quartiles, in other words, various income categories. It was developed, that index was developed by the Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech. We get our data for housing prices from the Virginia Association of Realtors, which was a major accomplishment because we have uniform data now on housing prices across the Commonwealth for each locality. Here is sort of the types that we have. We have sort of a quick facts portion of it, which is a quick summary of 2 or 3 housing indicators. Then we have housing and income characteristics for each of the localities, which is a table which provides everything from sales prices to rents, median rents to incomes, as well as the Housing Affordability Index. We have it on a variety of different measures overall, which is median, 80%, 60% of median, the lowest quartile, as well as ownership and rental. In addition, we have a lot of other information as well. Cost burden information, which which was mentioned there. How many families and what percentage of the families are spending more than 30% of their income for housing. That's what cost burden means. We have all that. That comes out of the census. Then we have a relationship between that measure and housing costs. Again, this is additional information that's in there. But really what I wanted to focus on today is the bottom one, is housing and commuting costs or transportation costs. And we just use the commuting costs because that's the one that is most relevant to today's discussion. Housing and Community Affordability Index is another component of our there. What we've done is taking housing costs and added your commuting costs to it and related it back to your income. The typical measure, again, for housing affordability is 30% of your income should not exceed should not be paying more than 30% of your income for housing. When you add commuting costs into it, you're now up to 34%. That's the national standard for housing and commuting costs. The data that I've shown here is first quarter data for this measure. It's interesting here, what I've done is for Virginia, housing, well, a little bit about housing affordability. This is at median income and 30% median income. If you look at median income, housing is relatively affordable. And a few years ago, 5 years ago, that figure was approaching right at 30% of the state as a whole. But over the last 5 years, with the decline of housing prices there and the percentage of housing that is in home ownership, housing has gotten more affordable overall. We'll see some issues there. When you get down at your lower income groups, and particularly at your severely the bottom quartile of the income, housing becomes very unaffordable, as most of everybody in this room there. But when you get down to 60% of median, I just illustrated here, overall, for all of those localities there. Jimmy and I were talking earlier. Here we saw a real spike in Lancaster first quarter of this year in the sales prices. Typically they've been going down for the last 5 years. First quarter this year went from an average of $250 up to $399 sales prices in Lancaster for that quarter. That's good news for there, but what I would also say for rural localities, you need to monitor it over a longer period of time because the number of sales has not skewed that. So there, but this is median. This is not average. So this is that's the midpoint. Same thing for the Williamsburg area. We had a spike there with increases in sales prices for the first quarter there significantly. So even in those two localities, as you can see. Again, King and Queen, King William and Westmoreland, the major driver there, and why you see that even at 60% falling below there is the sales prices over the last 5 years have dropped significantly and are still pretty low. Well, let's take a look at commuting in the Bay region. Virginia, what we did here is what is the average round trip commuting time, and then converted that through some formula into what costs are. So these are monthly costs like that. Virginia on average is a 61-minute commute time, and that is high for the national figures. So, and we'll get to what the percentages are. But James City County, Lancaster, Middlesex, Northumberland, and Williamsburg are lower than the state average. All those and the rest are higher. Thus, the cost associated with the commuting is lower as well. These, particularly Lancaster and Northumberland, it's interesting to me is that the areas that are adjacent to metropolitan areas, King and Queen, King William, Gloucester, you see significant increases in time as well as costs associated with commuting as relative to the there. And then when you get farther out into Lancaster there isn't as much commuting going from there to the metropolitan area, so that costs are a little bit less. Here what we've done is related commuting costs to income. Remember that 4% is the national standard. You shouldn't be spending more than 4% of your income for commuting. Virginia is high at 5.2%. So all of our localities, except James City County, even at median income, are spending more than that 4% figure. And some of them, Richmond County, up to close to 9%. Same way with Essex. So you can see quite a variety there. And when you look at 60% of median, again, you look up typically over 10% of your income is spent for commuting.
Neal, are you using gross income or not?
This is household income.
Before taxes? Right.
That is, yes, before taxes.
Thank you.
This is combining your, again, this is housing and commuting affordability index. So again, we're looking at a 34% standard of affordability. And with the exception of King and Queen, where remember that the affordability there was, because housing is so affordable, we have 132%. But at the 60% median income, all of the localities exceed the 34% threshold. And over at there, I'm sorry, go back there. Okay. Let me give you some other general things that covers pretty much. Before I go to these, any questions about that or any things that there?
Neal, when I look at Lancaster County, one of the things that always throw me when I look at these stats are that when I look at Lancaster County, for example, I looked at the tax rolls recently. You've got like 342 houses at $1 million or more. I look at Northumberland next door, they've got 140 houses at $1 million or more. Lancaster County is uniquely disproportionate wealth on the top end.
Mm-hmm.
There seems, so when I look at these stats, and you look at when you start looking at average house prices, it seems like it's unfair to factor in the top end of the market because it skews things so badly. It seems like to me the affordability index, you're not going to get a low-income person buying a $2 million house with water. So isn't there some factor that should be taken into place to knock out the top end of the market when you're looking at affordability issues?
The answer is yes, and what we use is the median. We don't use, median is the sort of the midpoint in all of the sales. So that helps skew so we don't use the average. If you're absolutely right. If you use averages, it would be higher than that because you do have, we use median in sales as well as median in income.
So you're saying we've got...
So if you have 100 sales,
yes,
and you have $100,000 at the bottom end, right, and $5 million at the top, the right, average then is what, a little over $2.5 million.
Right.
But if you've got 100 sales, we look at the midpoint. What is the 50th sale? And say, well, what is the value of that? So instead of $2.5 million, you probably only have 5 sales at the top end. You probably have at the bottom end, you probably have 60 sales, and in the median, you probably have the remaining 35 sales. So we charge where the 50 sale mark is. That would be where what would be the median. So it helps to do that. It doesn't filter out all of that effect, but it helps to ameliorate that effect.
Well, that's what bothers me, the filtering effect. It still seems like there should be some price threshold that you say, at what point is affordable housing off the radar in terms of affordability? Is it $250,000 or $150,000? But at some point, it seems like I worry about the filter, that that affects skewing those numbers when we look at it from our county, that it's a problem for us.
Right. Back there, what's helpful also is to look at the bottom quartile.
Yeah.
So if you look just at the bottom quartile of sales, which is in our housing affordability index kind of thing, you will get a different picture. You'll find that what you just said is that for that bottom quartile, housing, the typical housing is unaffordable.
Right.
On any measure, like that. What I'd also say, when we're looking at transportation costs, there is for the bottom folks, they don't commute and use transportation the same way. So that's the reason why we only compare transportation costs to median, 80% of median and 60% of median, because when your lower income people don't have the resources, don't have as many cars, they don't make as many trips, they don't commute as far because they have limited resources. So the patterns are different at that bottom quartile. So that's the reason why we think about that.
Good, thanks.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Good point. So let me go here. Statewide and also within these regions, one thing that's really affected affordability is incomes have been relatively flat for about a 10-year period. And you're hearing a lot of discussion at the national level, but that's been true there. We also in Virginia have seen that the increases in incomes have been skewed toward older, more wealthy populations. So again, the problems of the working class and the lower income populations have been more severe. So that home ownership now is much more affordable, but I'll put a big but on that because qualification for mortgages and getting mortgages is a real problem at this point in time. So if you can qualify and you have the credit scores and the employment history, et cetera, it is much more affordable there. Prices have declined significantly on a statewide basis in this region as well. Statewide, it's roughly about 24%, about a quarter have declined in the last 5 years. In this region, it varies a bit, but typically a big, significant decline in prices. What's not been told, the other part of the story is rents have continued to increase because there has been a slowdown in the housing market. There's been more pressure in the rental market, and they've been just continuing to increase. So with incomes declining, rents going up, housing in the rental side has become less affordable. Okay, cost burden households. On a statewide basis, we have over 1 million households now that are cost burdened. And that was continuing to increase up until last year. We saw a slight downtick last year in that, which is good news. But the general trend for the last 5 years has been cost burden households has been increasing. Ed mentioned to me about the needs in this region for affordable housing. What we do is in their housing Sourcebook, we have looked at renter households that are paying more than 30% of their income, in particular low-income housing renter households, less than 60% of median, and that the figure. So this number here represents 5612, represents the number of renter households in this region that are spending more than 30% of their income for housing. So that's what we would classify the need for that. Now the supply, which are people that are in housing similar to this housing project here and other affordable housing projects throughout the region, is 2420. So there is a huge gap of unmet need within the region. And let me just go, I think I've got that. Here is the numbers by locality for each of the localities. So you can see a significant number of unmet need there. And this is the percentage of that segment of the population that is paying more than 30% of their income. And sort of lastly, there, I would encourage everybody to go to the website, check out Sourcebook, because that will give you some information